The government has provided education to our youth. But for the nation to prosper for all time, a sound education must be succeeded by access to the right jobs and responsibilities so that our youth may bloom as individuals and at the same time serve their nation well. His Majesty, the King. Kuzangbola, Charos, welcome to your UN House and the 33rd session of Bhutan Dialogues. There are over 1.8 billion young people in the world today, history's largest ever generation of youth. Even before the pandemic overturned our lives, more than 1 in 5 were not in employment, education, or training. Empowering youth by investing in their human capital and in the innovative solutions they create is our great opportunity as we build a more sustainable, just, and peaceful world. Bhutan has made significant progress in the development of a basic education system. Today, much of the focus is in supporting Bhutan to become skill-based society through the provision of technical and vocational educational opportunities. All over the world, there is a cultural bias in favour of degrees and pressure young people into thinking mainstream education is the only valuable route for a student to take. The stigma associated with vocational education and training needs to be eliminated. Many of our youth do not choose vocational education and training because of the stigma around it. Many prefer academic education, seeing vocational education and training as a last resort that is only reinforced by its traditional omission from mainstream education. The creation of alternative vocational educational and training widens the avenues for young people to tap their potential by equipping them with the skills to help support the country's economic and social development. Today's topic is human capital and removing stigma in technical pathways. Our speaker is Kinga Tshering. Kinga is one of the founders of the Institute of Happiness, an evidence-based think and do tank that seeks to be a thought centre for gross national happiness. He is currently working on reform strategies for technical and vocational training with the Prime Minister's office, and he is leading the development of Bhutan's 21st century economic roadmap. Our host, Dr. Karma Phuntsho's work has had a twofold focus. As a disruptive thinker and social worker, he promotes social entrepreneurship among the nation's youth, the vast majority of whom are either unemployed or underemployed. My closing. For friends and Charos online, please drop your questions into the chat box. Tshering will be compiling the questions and will read them out to Kinga, and Dr. Karma will answer your questions. Please allow me to end with a quote from the UN Secretary General Guterres. Even before the pandemic, the world was facing a learning crisis. We must take bold steps now to create inclusive, resilient, quality education systems fit for the future. Tashidale, and thank you.
Kuzangbo, and welcome to Bhutan Dialogues. The Bhutan Dialogues is a space that we have created for civil conversations to mainly have personalities like you to come and deliberate on pressing issues. So we hope this forum to be a space where we can create this intellectual discourse, very broad, open heart, and continue to push the boundaries of our thought to really refine our ideas of development and human progress. And human capital is so important in our times as part of that development progress. You are a wonderful speaker to share your insights and experience on this topic. And before we begin this conversation on human capital and removing the cultural stigma associated with the Tibet pathway, I want to actually ask you to tell us a little bit about your own life, what inspiring chapters you had to put you on the track to become who you are right now. You had a wide range of education, then you have been a civil servant, you were also leading a private institute at one point, and now you are working on the Tibet program for the Prime Minister's office. So can you tell us a little bit about your own life journey?
Let's Kadichela, Dr. Karma, Jerry, and the colleagues of the UN House. What a privilege to be here, to be on the same dais, or to share on the Bhutan Dialogue on such an extremely important topic, the human capital and removing stigma in the technical and vocational education pathways. Just to share a little bit about myself, I think you briefly touched upon my stint in the civil service and the corporate sector, as well as then the education as well. And all along, I think some of the key running themes that I would like to bring up is that, of course, like all of us, we have been student our whole life, and especially for me, as when I turned 50, I went back to school. So I still feel I'm still a student. And so heavily influenced, I suppose, by in the family. My father was an ex-monk, and one of my elder sister is a nun, and my elder brother is a monk. So it's a heavily sort of academic centric in terms of monastic education dominated family. And all along, I also have been always wanted to be a monk. So the condition is, if I fail in the board exam, I have to become a monk. So I did my class 5 board exam, I didn't fail, then went and waited till class 8, I didn't fail, and then I went to class 10, I didn't fail. So unfortunately, I never got to become a monk. But I think that has been all along an inspiration which has sort of driven me in both in terms of education and the approach towards the various professional opportunity that I managed to get. So yes, I would say, and then of course right now I consider myself extremely lucky to be able to share the same dais as you, not only here but also as part of the economic roadmap task force, where we have so many things to share and learn from each other, and then also from so many other brilliant minds and people, and then also to get this opportunity to serve the government along with the Prime Minister's office to look at the technical and vocational education reform. So it has been extremely gratifying experience till date. Thank you.
Yes, but among all your past civil service, corporate world,
parliament too, yeah.
Yes, you have been a politician.
Yes.
So,
yeah, I forgot about that.
I think a lot of people know you for being a politician, but then
Yes.
you left politics. Why did you do politics?
Yes, and as I said, in search of greater knowledge. And I think, and also I think this is something where being elected in the parliament is such a great honor with, the public's faith entrusted in you, and for being elected, I think there's such a great honor. And then for me, to have resigned the parliament and gone for further studies, I think this is almost has been unthinkable. And it was an extremely tough decision for me. As in they say, lam jangop jen santang tanse mola. Tire maba dumtaji tilu ta shudochi bewachinte dinalu maba jamtoto di matensi shuni te alugila me tewa te da chu pha chota wa ju se te tunda bomle gom bomme chungkuri chungku me se. Te alugiwa te grand gobdalu te rum se na cha te sogin chu go se be te mongobda rum se lutinre ma cha ba thenju me se te anibe ko isi shuni. Tire diti do horyoda tha chego me dite da kadevara lakhayura rangi tha tuta di rangi te rangira chego be. Anilo da mapa te da danizumchi de tsora dinalumigil de gachi kechugo sa wajin te da majaragi yunte de mola ka tera berwe de chi di da machigi de Loden alevhayiru da rangi phamgiru da kaihara berute wa yunte te sisa jalle te nachiga se te devra be to mola de chi ani ye namsumi phisi shuniwi te mapa tenda da kadevra rangi migil ke de beru da te anizumgil labje de te samkho doru ribe ho te daru mise riri donga cha de te da mise phaja rangi china ye nam to la de wa chude na ru ane beso da te toro kadebe gum shujone se te rangi zasagi rate de nam to la de wa chim mise riri donga cha de kadebe ni mola ta ani luchi ngare hole te gyuba seru de shaba seru de te ani chi ta hi dam killer da kalo pido si juni da nale father su bewa chin te ani te plamidigi te nyamnyol hamidigi te ta nala falo koka padewe meselu cha kadwe shusuga madari mochi gi togi kundur kadwe dusuga te ani chingare hole migil de ani ke digi te koka lendo shuni
las karchela ani doxel su nameni namese pentodula ta na girgi khatule te mimanglo lakpardu nagi hemagi demkhonglu doxel sumchime te lakpar da ngachin da to jugi judurdila jugi judurgi migilchi di midenalo shen gomphaldani imbala te lakpar de nashun disugi ta thorum lubda sumchi juduchi chota chaise te mapalera kitabe malami jondare mabimi anzu mommete na gonlongap chu jevdalo lokpha lobda na junbe chapizi soda ta jinale sunzumbe me ta sersanjale intin nachiga sme lapsu dima se ani rumola rikpa nangbar chiang lap sediri kheba majurchang kewa shimarchol bai nolla rangilen badas namashini hirra dari intil hapko simichidu. So I think it's a fantastic example, particularly for a young audience, that we should be lifelong learners. But having done this lifelong learning and having lived through this major phase of transition that Bhutan has been going through, I often say Bhutan is going through enormous transition right now, culturally, economically, socially, politically. You have witnessed that. How would you assess or evaluate Bhutan? For instance, we are working on the economic task force team together, and the economic situation is not certainly one that is that we can be proud of. What is your assessment on the economic situation, very honestly, for our audience?
Plus, I think economic situation, I mean, it's in the public domain. I think just on Council of September 5th, the Honorable Finance Minister has shared that the GDP percentage growth rate of the nation has gone down to minus 6.7%. And in fact, the other worrying concern is that we have a constitutional provision that the recurring budget cannot be used from outside aid and grant donors or capital budget. And this is one of the main concerns because of the fact that the main revenue generating sectors, especially primarily tourism and vis-a-vis wholesale retail and all the down the value chain has been hit. So therefore, including PIT, so therefore the revenue, recurrent revenue that normally pays for all our salary and so on are being impacted. And I think if that money falls short, then you have to dip into the capital budget. And I think this is one of the major concerns of the government. And as you rightly pointed out, I think primarily because of the COVID, we are in a dire situation. And of course, I think we have our leadership, primarily, the government finance minister, they're working extremely hard on that. And I think this is where we are also trying to most way contribution to the economic roadmap. Now, despite the focus on the economic and GDP growth rate, we do get criticism saying that, that means are you forgetting GNH? But the fact is, I think the need of the hour for the next 2 to 3 years perhaps is economy, is creating jobs. Now, the population census and housing survey says that next 20 years, 22 to 47, we are going to reap a demographic dividend in Bhutan, 115,000 young people coming in. The main worry is now, if you don't do something now to prepare them for that, we are going to be facing a demographic disaster rather than a demographic dividend. So I think these two are very related things. Now, the question is, can we create enough jobs, or can we prepare the skill and the supply side so that they can drive the economy? So I think these are something debatable, which is entirely now up to us to carry on such a discourse.
On this demographic dividend thing, when I came back to Bhutan in 2013 to spend more time here, I had the same hopes of reaping a demographic dividend with such a huge young workforce. But then the longer I stayed here, when you see your own siblings, nephews, nieces, relatives being unemployed, depending on elder relatives, and of course the nation's sort of general revenue generation not taking off as we expected, with especially the hydro sector, I'm not very optimistic, because human capital can't be sort of turned around in a few years' time. It takes a whole generation of education and upbringing. Do you think our young people are of the sort that will provide us dividends, or will they be more disasters and dependence? What's your take on this?
Yes, Doctor, I mean, I would like to sound off the optimistic note. Yes, definitely, if we don't do something, we could hit a disaster and social unrest and so on. But on the positive and optimistic note is, I think, because of our, His Majesty's visionary leadership, all along, I think, as in a crystal clear in terms of what strategies we need to adopt to get our young people ready. I think that has been ample examples and case in point. For example, the Desung group, and then also the kind of services they're able to provide. And then also, I think the psyche and the empowerment that these people get from undergoing through, so, even though the training may be 1 or 2 months, but the kind of impact that it has on our young kids, giving them a sense of purpose in life, and then, with emboldened and now ready to go forward and so on. So I feel that with the leadership as well as now, we cannot just leave it up to His Majesty alone. I think every one of us must play our part. And as you said, yes, sometimes there are disappointing times, because even for me, I experienced that my own dear and near relatives are, not up to the mark, even though we may consider ourselves among the privileged part of the group. But the young people are not ready to take on their responsibility, either into drugs or sometimes behind bars, and you can go on listing, and it does give me a lot of worry. But at the same time, I think now, if you take this responsibility at the individual level, as a parent, as a sibling, as a citizen, I think taking cue from what His Majesty has done and articulated, I think we can achieve and turn this into a demographic dividend. And one thing I feel is that you alluded to again the change that we are going through. I think change as per se is not the main concern. I think it's the rate of the change. So one of the books that I read on the future shock by Alvin Toffler always brings out clearly, saying that you divide the number of years by the amount of change that a certain nation has gone through, and he talks about that we have achieved all the changes over the last 8 lifespan compared to the last 800 lifespan. So for Bhutan, I think this is the same thing. So the policymakers and I think all of us, if we can make sure that the rate of change is something that we can handle and tackle, and accordingly, I think align our young people, whether it's education or whether it's life skilling. So sometimes I think one of the rate of changes of expectation in this case, in the skilling part, is far exceeding the ground reality. So everybody wants to be educated and everybody feels that you have more degree than what you can do. But on the other hand, the demand side of the job creation is not there. So this is, I think, where the rate of change in one area is far exceeding the rate of change in the other area. And this is where we feel the biggest gap is.
I often say that Bhutan has changed much more in the last 50 years than in the 500 years before that. I think there's definitely this very rapid change going on. One of the things, perhaps as part of that change, is also we have lost the culture of enterprise, of hard work. Now, if you look at our grandparents or parents' generation, they were daring to toil in the sun. They were ready to roll up their sleeves and do things, learn things. But do you think the education system we have today, the cultural upbringing we have today, is preparing our young people to be such initiative takers, daring, bold, enterprising, hardworking youth?
No, unfortunately not, I think. I think here, I'm not just saying because you're the Loden Foundation founder. Evaluation is that, probably you have done more than anybody else in terms of, imbibing that sense of culture of entrepreneurship in our young people through your effort. And unfortunately, I think the same kind of program, curriculum or whatever is not happening in the main school education system, because I think, I know I watched a lot of the earlier Bhutan Dialogue here as well, and then you had so many expert people giving their opinion on education, and I think it's exactly what they said. Currently, our education system is heavily content-based. There is no critical thinking. There is no, as a matter of fact, we do not also have an innovation policy. So therefore, who will encourage and who will empower somebody to take, take risks in whatever they're doing? And also, the other thing is that not only culture, but I think this is a universal aspiration that everybody would like to have a degree. I think this is whether you're talking about Bhutan, Korea, US, or for that matter, any of the advanced OECD countries. So that is a fact you cannot deny. I mean, that's everybody's aspiration, and even more so in Bhutan. All our parents say, "Oh, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. So maybe I think for us now is that we acknowledge that, accept that, and then this is where the pathway comes in. And I feel that to young people who are aspirational through the normal education channel, knowing that they will have no entrepreneurial skill, but they will have academic certificate, let them go ahead, and that's their choice. On the other hand, I think for those who are choosing the vocational path, they also should not feel the stigma by saying, okay, but by choosing vocational path, now I'm having a dead-end career as far as my aspiration is concerned. So this is where the path is, I think, where we need to open up and say that, look, you're a vocational student, but after 5-6 years of doing your trade, whatever you're interested in, you still have a lifelong learning opportunity to come back to school and get your degree. So then, by that point, I don't think he'll even be interested in joining the government, because he knows the taste of money. He knows the taste of his success, whatever he's doing. So I feel that it's a humble effort. It's already there in the government policy. The only thing is, I think, when it comes to implementation, we probably need to segregate it and make it a little bit more open. So again, back to the education point, not make it content heavy, but create this seamless, entry and exit between school and vocational, between job and back to school, between back to school and back to vocation, and eventually prepare them for these risks. Because whenever somebody makes a decision, it's a risk. And that's one of the reasons I think we are tunneled into taking the fail-safe approach of, okay, you study science, you be an engineer, you study medicine, be a doctor, and that all other things doesn't matter. And I used to give the same advice to my daughters, but now my perspective have changed.
You are currently working on reforming the technical and vocational education system. One of the reforms you are suggesting is that the vocational and technical skills element must be injected or inserted into the mainstream education. From what level and in what manner will that be integrated?
What we are advising primarily I'm working under the aegis of the Ministry of Labour and Human Resources, and under that ministry we have the Department of Technical Education, who is looking after all the vocational training issues. We have 8 of the issues around the country. Back in 2018, there's already a project through the ADB assistance where some courses are already being introduced as of this year, but unfortunately because of the pandemic it could not take off, into class 9 and 10 in 7 select schools. And I feel this is a very good approach, because if we suggest a reform which is going to be national reach, then it's going to be very difficult. Number A, resources. Number 2, whether it's going to work or not. Number 3, then if it fails, then what do we do with that? So I think the approach taken is take 7 schools, introduce 9 and 10. But after that, there are 2 main things which have come up. One is that now kids can go straight from class 11 to 12. So after 10, they go straight to class 12. So they have free education all the way till class 12. The second thing is now we'll have Gelsung program coming in after class 12 as well. So because of these 2 very important and critical factors in the student's life, our recommendation is now let us introduce vocational in 11 and 12. From class 10, they have to go to the vocational school, but they don't want to because of the image, stigma and everything. And even now, if you wait, now expecting kids to come to vocational education after class 12, after Gelsung, will be very difficult. So the suggestion is, if the kids don't come to you, why don't you go to the kids? So which means take the curriculum into class 11 and 12. So I think for now, the submission to the government and the ministry is very, very focused. So take as a prototype project, focus on 1,000 students, focus on 100 teachers in 7 primarily 7 schools, and then along collaborate with 3 TTIs, and then see what happens after 2 years. So this is a way of sandboxing and
pilot projects in some schools. Where are the schools?
So the schools are 7. One is in Pabisa Central School, and one is in Pajo, and the other 2, Pinaka Central School, then Kurutha High School, and then combining with them will be the Kurutha TTI, Samthang TTI, Thimbu TTI, Rangjung TTI, and then also Rangjung High School, and then Chume and Chume High School.
Then, of course, one of the issues that was raised with regard to the technical and vocational training is also that the quality of the training that's given in the TTIs and the Zorik Chusum centers are not on par with what the market would really wish to have. And also there was questions about relevance of the content of the training. What kind of reforms or initiatives are you taking to address those two problems?
The question, I suppose, is, as you say, what are you going to do about it? So one of the submissions is that one is, how do you then motivate the instructors? Of course, everybody agrees. Hey, if the instructors are not motivated, what do you expect? So again, here I think the pathway is now extended to the level of the instructors. So it's not only the students. So if you look at the instructors right now, most of them have diploma or graduated from the TTI. So therefore, their level of experience has primarily been within that circle. And the other thing is they also feel that their aspiration is limited because in some way they're teaching in a dead-end career where they also have a dead-end career. So our submission is that, look, why don't we discuss with RUB and then upgrade the level of the teachers? So currently they're diploma, make them go through a sort of a part-time program and then they get the bachelor's degree. So all of a sudden now their confidence level goes up. And this is so true because even after pandemic, what the UNESCO and UNIVOC has done is they've done a extensive survey study of about 27 countries, including Bhutan. And no matter what, the ultimate aspiration, not only for the students, but also for the teachers, is that I need to get a degree at the end of the day. And this is something I feel that we could wish away, but it's not going to happen. So why don't we accept that and play along with that? So give them a degree, but also then the other strategy is then maybe take industry experts on board. So when we talk about plumbing, I mean, there are so many expert people who may not have a degree, but he, by virtue of the fact he has skills, he can probably teach more than actually what a degree guy, instructor can teach him. The third component is we are saying that let's do international collaboration. So if I teach what I know, then there's going to be limited to how much I've learned in the first place. And what I've learned is by looking around, by probably going through the same technology and method as we used to have past 30, 40 years ago. So through this international collaboration, why it may be resource intensive, why can't we tie up with IT of Singapore, Nanyang Polytechnic of Singapore, TAF in Australia? And these are some of the cutting edge, highly international as well as regional high reputation institutes who can provide you with the joint certification, the skilling, and at that level where then all of a sudden your demand is not in Bhutan, but actually your demand could be abroad, where if you work as a regular person from Bhutan in Australia, you may get paid $20 an hour, but now all of a sudden you get paid $50 an hour. So those are the components which I feel can not only improve the quality but make the vocational system very, very attractive for our children.
The diseases that has plagued the vocational and technical training sector is that there is a cultural stigma, the topic that we chose today. I was looking at the Tracer study report, and I found that only 0.09% of the students in these centers, in these institutes, had parents who had first degree or masters.
Yes.
You look at their parents' backgrounds, 77% of the students have their parents as farmers, and about 70% uneducated, meaning they never went to school. So the students in the vocational training centers are very clearly associated with an educational or part of the society which doesn't have that educational privilege, or are certainly perhaps also low income, although it's not, it can't be generalized. So there seems to be that cultural stigma. Only people who are less well off, less educated seem to send their children to these centers. How can we change that? Of course, you shared these various ways of having pathways for them to get a degree in the end, but would degrees or even higher remuneration abroad, will this be able to change the mindset, or is it something more deeply embedded in our culture that blue-collar job, physical work, manual work is to be looked at? How do we address this?
I think I'm glad that we have gone through the Tracer study, and it does point out some stark pictures. But one thing I wanted to share with everyone is that the picture of that stigma and vocational associated group relates to less than 5% of the students of class 10 pass out. And if you look at that, then that group is primarily immediately associated with mason, plumbing, and carpentry and electrician. So therefore, you're looking at a specific occupational group who takes in only about less than 5% of the students, and then we are then generalizing that to the other 70% of the students who actually do vocational or don't do vocational, but they definitely are not going to the universities. So the question is, what are they doing? Where are they? So this is something which has been very fascinating. So I found out that actually when you pass out class 10 and 12, sometimes you are better off by not going to these institutes. Why? Because then you don't get the branding. Oh, I didn't. I just studied class 10. I just studied class 12. So okay. So you're identified with Punakha School or Mongar High School or from Leketa High School from where you have graduated. So there's no stigma. The moment you go into vocational skill, just because you're talking about this narrow group of occupational skills, immediately you're equated with the labor work which is in the construction industry. So for general public, I just wanted to clarify that this is very, very narrow focus of the vocational skill you're looking at. The other 95% of the vocational skill to do with fashion technology, to do with food processing, to do with hospitality, to do with tourism sector, painting, embroidery. I think those are some of the fascinating vocational paths which people don't talk about. But a lot of them go do that anyway without going to a formal vocational degree. So I think in some ways, with our focus on specifically these 6 vocational institutes, we have done more damage than actually helped it. And I think this is something, a very fascinating sort of fallout to do with cultural outlook, or also then immediately comparing with whatever economic activity they are into. So I'm quite optimistic by when I look at the other 100 private sector vocational institutes who are offering accounting, tally, computerized system. So they're offering all this, and that accounts for more than 10% of the student population, more than twice the amount of students who are into this government TTIs. So therefore, I feel that not all is lost. Actually, our kids are doing quite well. And even if you look at RCC, out of the 8,000 support staff, majority of them, 6,000 of them are actually class 10 and 12 pass. Only 783 of them are from vocational institute pass. So that's fascinating because the way that we are branding the vocation institute actually is doing us more damage than actually helping them. Yeah.
That's fascinating and also slightly sad thing to hear that the state institutes sort of kill that fashion and trend that could have been associated with. Certainly, I think today we can talk about training in coding and programming and graphic designs, which are quite sort of coveted. And I think even traditional sector doing painting and sculpture, and these are high artistic works. So he said, how can we change this image then of our vocational training centers not being just of masons and plumbers, but of also inculcating and promoting these high skills, high talents?
Especially if you're looking at this narrow skill gap, it is going to be difficult. A cultural mindset and earlier, I think we can boast about the Zurich Shusum in our Bhutanese culture. And I think those days it was the right approach. So your carpentry skill is equated to a grandeur of architecture, monuments, and then your embroidery skills, intricacies of thankas. And I think that we need to revive that. And I don't know, to be very honest, I don't know how to do it.
How did we lose it in the first case?
Yeah, how did we lose it?
Lopen, so respected.
Exactly.
They're well paid, well venerated, and respected.
Correct.
So, how did you manage to lose that? How can we?
Well, I mean, the short answer is, I suppose, globalization. Of course, we can't fight it. I mean, the basic thing is a lot of comparative advantage. You get cheaper import foreign workers. So be it. I think.
So that's you just mentioned foreign workers. Did we actually think too much about this job mismatch or job and skills mismatch that we talk about? Now that there's plenty of jobs in the construction industry, and then we have a lot of young people who don't have the skills or readiness to take them up. And just to sort of overcome that problem, we have the VTIs mainly geared towards construction, and we forgot this prestigious role of the artists. And so was the issue of this mismatch between jobs and skills that we worried too much about? Should we just leave the manual labor to the expat laborers?
I think you're right in pointing out. I think we should not be too concerned about job mismatch. And in the first place, we really need to figure out what do you mean by mismatch. And I've been having trouble with that because, okay, if you look at the supply side and demand side, then okay, maybe a comparison of mismatch. So is the supply more, is it demand more? And in our case, it's quite, again, confusing because one point we're saying, oh, we don't, supply side, we are producing too many children with skills or with degrees. So the supply is more. Then on the demand side, when you ask them, they say, oh, we need people who knows how to do plumbing there, but we can't find it. So it is not a question of mismatch. To me, I think it is again distortion set in by, in a way, because of the fact that we have readily available workers which we can bring from outside. So you are right. I think, I mean, last time I was, again, anecdotal, but I'm sure that after the tracer study, we'll figure this out also. When we say there's shortage of plumber, what do you mean? How many plumbers do you need? Are you talking about 1,000? Are you talking about 100? To me, in Thimphu, I think if you have 50 plumbers, that's enough. The point is, I think, when we supply the skills, now if you looked at the tracer study, a lot of the TVET graduates, sometimes they are also being, I think, frustrated because even though they have the skill, they may not get the right job or they may not get the right payment. And B, another view is that even if you, with the TVET graduate skill, especially among the girls, the moment you get an office dispatch job or the moment you get a clerical job, they immediately switch. So it is, I think, a part of a social engineering process that we really have to think closely and see how we can revive the age-old tradition. And again, that ties into, I think, our economic roadmap when we are discussing on the free trade issue. So right now we have Zorik Shusum who are producing these fascinating domes and they are making the statues. But the main problem is there's no market because even the local market is captured by statues from Nepal, which comes at half the price. So what do we do now?
Now, one of the things that we know for sure is that social mobility can be influenced by the financial status. If you become rich, your social status suddenly rises. So if the government, for instance, restricts foreign laborers from coming in and then allows the local graduates of the vocational training centers to work and also demand a higher remuneration, and as they earn more, would their status also become more sort of coveted, more attractive? Can we change the social stigma associated with VTIs and the graduates through sort of financial or economic intervention?
Well, Doctor, I think definitely that seems to be the say one of the solutions. And in fact, a lot of people were asking, and whenever we have brainstorming discussion, that seems to be one idea which you feel could be implemented. Okay, why don't you stop the foreign laborers and then pay our kids higher wage? So in a way, isn't that what's happening now?
Well,
yeah.
I mean, we know lots of Bhutans who go abroad to do the same thing, but can we do the same thing here within the country?
Right.
To sort of let them gain a social prestige through financial incentives.
Exactly, that's what I was alluding to. So I was saying that in a way, because of the COVID situation, because we cannot bring in any workers from outside, so it is a perfect situation where we can implement that probably that hypothesis in theory. But whether it will take a longer time or whether our kids are not really going into even given the situation is something which we have to find out over the next 1 or 2 years. Ministry has already initiated the Build Bhutan project, but the problem is initially 3,800 kids have registered, then slowly drop down. When it comes to actual training, then only maybe a dozen of them show up. So actually we really need to do a lot of introspection on that. Then on the other part is, I think, again, the overall cost to the economy. I think at this point is the right opportunity because a lot of the private sector, housing developers, and then also people, even in the government sector where a lot of construction projects are held up, right now they don't mind paying higher because they're saying, look, it's going to cost the project more, but we don't mind because the COVID justification is there and we need to really step up and fill this void. But overall, I think in the long run, we do need to be sensitive about the cost to the economy. So if your house is going to cost you 30% more to the workforce, then how will somebody be able to afford the rent? Because you have to recoup your rent somehow anyway. So I think this is something which we have to be a little careful in terms of interfering in the economic structure. So if we can keep continuing getting import foreign workers from outside, especially for doing the lower end job, I think we should do it, because I think it's always easier said than done. I cannot tell my children to say go and do masonry, go and do plumbing. They're not going to do it. So why force them? And I think same thing applies, especially so because as you noted, 70-80% of the kids' parents are from the rural areas, and primarily Sikh Zongkak, Pema Gasel, Tashian, Tashigang, Mongar. So is it fair for us to think that we should put their kids into this manual labor when our own kids are not willing to do it? So I think from that perspective, we should continue importing foreign workers when COVID situation dies down. Let them do all the low-end jobs. And I think it complements the fact that if we can, then our kids can do the supervisory level. But this is where I think where we really need to focus on the skilling and the quality part. Because if you can go out as a really good plumber, then you should get paid 30,000 and not the current 13,000. So I think that will make a difference.
But I want to come back to the many sort of initiatives, the reform exercise you have undertaken is suggesting, so integrating it in the school curriculum, in the pilot schools, creating pathways for VTI graduates to come into higher education, tertiary education to get degrees, and also link up with foreign institutions. How confident are you that the government is going to take up these proposals and suggestions?
Right. Oh, I'm fairly confident. The reason is because I think there's a clear vision. Then the other thing is government is highly committed towards reforming the TVET sector. And the third one is you should have resources to back up the plan. And in this case, all three of them are there. As of now, they are. I can't say about tomorrow or the day after. As of now, I think government has fully committed ADB financing for the TVET reform sector. So within that scope, I think all the strategies and elements are captured. And also, because of the opportunity to mainstream into class 11 and 12, actually it will allow saving of precisely about 1.5 billion Niltram. The reason is because if you need to expand other campuses so that you can take another 4,000 kids in, then you have to build up new infrastructure. And at this point with COVID situation, I think it's going to be pretty expensive. On the other hand, the students are already there in class 11 and 12 anyway. They have hostel, they are eating there. So the only thing extra required is maybe an extra workshop. And the other thing is, I think when you mainstream, the other compelling case is that they come out now, so therefore that stigma is not there. Oh, I'm doing vocational now, I'm in a dead end career. No. If I get good mark because of vocational, if I score higher, it'll pull up my other subjects and then I can go to Sharatsi. So that attraction is there. Second thing is, after having passed out from Gedu, let's say, hypothetically, if they don't get anywhere, hey, I have a skill now. So I think that is the most important thing. So now you have a degree, you have a skill. I see that chances are that somebody with a skill and a degree is more proud to be actually working in the skill because he already have a degree behind his back anyway. So even given the cultural expectation, I'm a graduate, yes, I'm doing this, but I'm making money. And the next time I sit for RCC exam, if I choose to, if I get picked up, then I can go to and become a director and secretary anyway. So I think this gives a huge confidence and opening to somebody's sort of future career pathway. I don't mean that every kid we need to channel that way, but among 100 kids, if one of them go through that, that provides the empowerment and the inspiration to the rest of the 99 kids. And I feel that this is the only way to sort of really equalize the opportunity for our children.
That's a wonderful initiative, and I hope this will change the mindset and the attitude we have towards Tibet education. But then one of the broader issue that we have to face is, aren't we glamorizing degrees too much? Of course, it will almost sound hypocritical for two of us to say this, but somehow the Bhutanese society, and particularly the state, seem to glamorize degrees so much that you make it a requirement for young people to have a degrees instead of skills or experience and other things. So in the long run, we have to be lifelong learners, but should we associate education and degree too much, or almost conflate the two? And maybe for a lot of young people, that message is very important, that education and degrees are two separate things.
Yes, that I think that is the recommendation for now. If you look at all the upcoming new education policies, but it's easier said than done. I think, as somebody says, the world has changed so many, been so many changes through the last 300, 400 years. Only thing that is constant is the education system. So yes, we are glamorizing degree, but at the same time, I feel that just because you can't change it overnight, just because it's a wishful thinking, so what? Let's accept it. So which means I think encouraging people to get as many degrees as possible, but also at the same time give them the skill. So I always keep coming to that. Now, I mean, look at in Loden Foundation. I don't know in terms of data what does it show, but for the people who have gone through the Loden Foundation entrepreneurship, how many of them who are successful? What are some of the factors that they fall back on? Is it the degree that they're counting on? Is it the skill they're counting on? Is it the ecosystem or the relatives they have? And my own theory is that currently, if you finance somebody who is freshly out of Gedu College, he will be upbeat because he has learned about management system, leadership, accounting, commerce. So he thinks he knows everything, right? So you give him, say, 1 million Yultrum and ask him to do his business. So he has got a perfect business plan. But the chances that 99% of the time he or she will fail is highly likely than succeeding. On the other hand, if he or she has gone through certain level of skilling, so he also got a degree, now he knows how to prepare the business proposal, he knows how to keep the accounting system. And then guess what? The 10 million Yultrum that he receives, he will only invest in an area which is absolutely critical. The majority of the cost right now goes to hiring somebody because you can't do the thing that you wanted to do. You want to build something, you don't have the skill, you just have a degree. So you spend your money by hiring 3 people who knows how to have to do the skill, who has the skill. So if you have the skill, you have the degree, you have the loan, I guarantee you that rather than 99 chances of person of failing, he may have more than 99 chances percent of succeeding. So that is my hypothesis that I'm providing actually. Yeah.
Nice. I think in Loden's case, from what I know, I think it's mainly the determination and the persistence and the hard work, the sense of enterprise that has really been a determining factor in terms of success. We have lots of people with degrees who have actually been utter failures. And skills does matter, yes, especially bookkeeping skills and marketing skills and so on. In one of our conversations, you said you always reflect on your relevance, how relevant you are as a husband, as a father, as a son, and so forth. So I really like that. How do you advise other people, especially young ones, to think about their own relevance to their family, to their nation, to their community? How do you advise?
Concern about relevance, to me, is almost to the point of being paranoid. Am I relevant? And it's not something just a casual question saying, am I relevant? No. It is like, hey, how am I doing as a father? And yes, I met my wife 30 years ago, but, but how am I doing now? She's still, convinced with what I'm doing. Am I relevant to my neighbors? And in my case, I've been a politician, so am I relevant to the people who voted me in at that time? So I think this is almost to the point of being paranoia. And I keep thinking about this thing about about Great Britain, glorious past and no future. and I think we have to reinvent at every level. And for the young kids, I think this is for them is even more opportunity because they have their whole future ahead of them. So don't count on your laurels. Don't think that I have this degree and that degree, but always see, okay, I'm as good as what I can be tomorrow to my friend. I'm as good as what I can be tomorrow to my teacher, to my parents. And I think that is something that which you earlier mentioned is the hard work and determination and the sense of paranoia which you have to constantly, I think, drive you forward. In this, I always remember that this very popular saying in African proverb saying that every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows that it must run faster than the fastest lion or that it will be killed. Every morning, a lion wakes up. It knows that it must outrun the slowest gazelle or it will starve to death. It doesn't matter whether you're a lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you better start running.
Yes. And I think you are running in many ways. We have worked together now for about 10 months. So my final question before we turn to the audience is, how did you acquire this positive attitude, this positive outlook, and how can others cultivate the same?
I think the positive attitude can get you into problems, especially when you talk about working within a system. I think there are decorums, there are rules, and you feel that you can run fast enough, then that's, I think, sometimes a little risky as well. But I think to your question, where do you get that positive attitude is primarily through the collective energy that I get. And and especially being associated with friends like yourself and among all the colleagues, I think that really empowers me a lot.
I am often quite critical and cynical about
No,
things.
but that's the I think that's the value addition, doctor. I feel that within our group, so this is something I especially appreciate in having doctor. And sometimes doctor may believe in something, but just as to be the devil's advocate, doctor will argue otherwise, and doctor can get away with any argument he makes because it's so compelling. But that's precisely the value that I drive in. So that's why you see me very positive and willing, because I feel that the collective, and again, I think this is not cliche because you look at the studies. I think Yuval Noah Harari, okay, his famous book, and he always says that look, the main difference between a chimpanzee and a human being is that the collective coordination ability of a chimpanzee is only 15, whereas we human beings, we can go to 150 people. So I think from that scientific based evidence, social learning process, I feel that if I'm in room together with 5 people, hey, that's the best opportunity I have to learn from them. Which means then whatever you tell me, of course, it needs to be backed up by homework. We need to do homework so that we don't make the wrong decision. So that's something that drives me to be positive and willing to do. So it's not just my idea. It's not just my thing. I could have gone wrong, but 5 people put together, they must have done something right. So I think this is something where I'm really convinced now that 5 heads to put together, not as a specific sum of these 5 heads, but as an intangible, tacit, collective whole as a 5, then all of a sudden you create something entirely different, which perhaps is not possible if you take the individual things and put them together. So that's what encourages me, and I'm still to find out whether it puts me in more trouble or helps me out.
Now let's turn to the greater network then, to our audience. I think there are lots of people out there watching us and may have questions for us.
A recent study of 2,669 technical training institute graduates from 2016 to 2018 reported that 76.55% came from farming parenthood background, followed by civil servants at 6.67%. Similarly, 69.91% of their father and 88.35% of the mother did not have education. Can the preceding findings be inferred that vocational and technical jobs are for those coming from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who do not have much option? Would economically sound and academic-centric families send their children who do not qualify for colleges to vocational trainings instead of sending them to private colleges? So that's the first question. The second question, the whole education system needs to catapult. Intermediary intervention may be a temporary patch and not a comforting solution. Private sector needs to be part of the equation for such an intervention to make an impact. What do you think?
Right. On the first question, yeah, absolutely true. I think the tracer study again, we are looking at a tracer study which has been carried out 2009 to 2018, and primarily to do with 8 technical institutes. So again, plumbing, carpentry, and masonry, and so on. So for them, the tracer study has pointed out, majority of the parents are not educated. Majority of the parents are farmers. Majority of them come from some of the furthest Dzongkhaks who are disadvantaged in so many ways. So that is true. The other question on whether privileged families or academic-oriented families, would they send their children to vocational education? No, because even if they don't get into the colleges into Bhutan or UB, we have, as of now, I don't know, not as of now, maybe before COVID, say if you pick up one campus in India, Tamil Nadu, Coimbatore University or whatever, at any point in time, there are 400 Bhutanese students getting their degrees in I don't know what. Thank God we have RTC. Again, the point to having private sector participation in the education system. So at least RTC is able to keep about 1,000 Bhutanese kids in Bhutan, even though they don't qualify for the RUB colleges. So to your question that will the Bhutanese parents, if you are educated family background and if you have the money, would you send them to Tibet? As of now, no, they don't. So I think this is where I suppose the second question on the private sector participation is where now we need to invite private sector participation to come out with innovative ways of imparting skills, come out with innovative ways of connecting the mismatch that earlier we alluded to. So we found out that in other countries what they do is government will not now set the criteria and curriculum, because that is the old traditional method. We were talking about education method. So what the government will do is government will create an endowment fund and then float a request for proposal to the private sector in the market. Because private sector, they have the ears on the ground. They know exactly what skills is required, say next year. They know what projects are coming online. They know which hotels are coming up, where kids need to go. So you float this endowment fund as a request for proposal to the private sector, and the private sector will put together as per the job demand and then what skills are required, what is the cost benefit analysis, and also tie certain percentage of the payment to the success factor of linking the graduates to job employment. So if that is done like they do in some other countries, and I feel that this is where we can really involve private sector, because as government sector, I think again overnight is very difficult to switch from the legacy system to an innovative system, which by the way, if any other education system needs to be innovative, it can be the TVET sector, because as you understand, the school systems, you're talking about PP all the way to class 12. University system, you're talking about 4 years of education system. Any tweaking you do in those curriculum is going to be a little risky for you, unless you know what the impact is going to be. On the other hand, TVET system, you have curriculum which is as short as 2 months to as long as 2 years. So within that spectrum, you can make any changes you want, and then focus it on, again, a prototype project and see what the impact is, and then make your bigger national policies and decision based on the outcome.
So is it foreseeable then that the vocational and training institutes we have right now be given off to the private agents? So
No.
the government subsidize the private actors.
I don't think the private will take it because some of the private, there are 100 private sector training institutes in the country. So that itself shows actually in some ways the Ministry of Labour and Information has been extremely progressive. Show me other than the economic affairs, where is the private sector domain. Show me any other ministries where you have 100 private sector licensed entities. Ministry of Labour. Now if you look at what they're doing, so they will take up all skills related where the investment cost is lower. They will take up where the payback is a little faster and it makes sense. And also where they can actually don't need to build up the long training capacity within themselves, but they can go outside, get from Singapore, get from Malaysia, and then do the training, and then after send out. Nothing wrong with that, I think. But what the government TTIs are doing is the gestation period is long. There need to be a lot of investment made, and it has to be there for the long haul. So I don't think this is going to be taken up by private sector. I think in my discussion with the experts and all the alumni of the TTIs, one thing that has actually impacted the TTI is the institutional growth. What happened is back in 1965, when the Don Bosco Technical Institute started off, it was at the prime of the, in terms of quality and in terms of recognition. So it has a lot of prestige. And some of the alumni, even now, we say the former opposition leader, the president of Chennai colleges. And that time it was mainstreamed as part of class 9, 10, 11, and 12. So after that, you can go to RCC, become a Dasho, or you can just open your workshop and start making money. So that's why there was no sort of stigma at all. The other thing is then 2003, that Don Bosco was actually dismantled and taken over by RUB as a CST. After Don Bosco, there was a progression to GENEC, which was Deothang in Samuzongkha. But again, 2014, it was upgraded and taken over by RUB. So in effect, the whole TVET growth has been very, very tumultuous. And I just want to make sure that I don't add to that chaos and tumultuous situation.
With regard to introduction of vocational training in school at grades 11 and 12, would introducing vocational education not necessarily aimed at employment, but rather as a hobby or skill for all students, very early, say around primary school, help empower young children to explore vocational crafts in early life? And the last question, do you think there would be a time where parents and children would consider TVET to be their first choice over mainstream education?
Yes, sir. So answering the second question, TVET will be their main choice if it answers the first question. So which means if you offer TVET as an optional hobby classes into the mainstream education, then it will be the first choice, because then you are not bound to specific sector or to a stigma related situation. So I think in this, the humble submission as in terms of advisory report or whatever is now, if you can mainstream it, make it into an option where now the class 11 and 12 students have, in addition to the 11 courses that they have to finish in 2 years, focus on STEM subjects, focus on ICT now with this huge push in data and technology. Then as part of optional subjects, competing among agro, competing among economics, can you provide the vocational curriculum? And I think this is something where we are submitting to the ministry and the government. And if this is adopted, we have gone down to the details of curriculum. So the vocational curriculum requirement is about 2,000 hours, whereas the school optional timetable availability is only 426 hours. So now how do you jive with that? For bringing 2,000 hours to squeezing to 426 doesn't seem at all possible in the first place. But when you go down to a deeper level, one option is after high school, then they can get on-the-job training, which will provide them with another 1,500 hours. And this is another actually very positive impact, because current OJT of 3 months means nothing. As a student, you go there with barely shoestring stipend, you don't know where to live, you don't know how to eat, and the employees don't want to take you in because 3 months you are there, they don't want to take time off and teach you. So on the other hand, you sort of stretch it out to 1 year, then it's a compelling case where the employees are happy to take you in also. So the point is, I think, yes, my sincere hope is that this will be provided as optional, because we have worked out the hours, we have worked out the curriculum.
Yes, thank you. I think it's a shame that somehow the word vocational has got totally separated from the original noun vocation. When you do something out of vocation, you are following your passion. And so the significance of the word vocational is sort of lost in the Tibet context. My final question, I think, as time has run out now, is we offer 2 books as token of appreciation. So which 2 books you chose and why? You can share that.
So I've chosen one is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is actually recommended my daughter. I went through the synopsis, extremely intriguing, and she doesn't have the hard copy, but I definitely want to read the hard copy. It's about a story of Greek tragedy, so what more exciting can it be?
And then
the second one. The second one, this book is The Believing Brain by Michael Shermer. Again, Michael Shermer, I realize, is a fellow alumni from Pepperdine University. So he's a clinical psychologist, and as the topic says here, from ghosts and gods to politics and conspiracies, how we construct belief and reinforces them as truth. So this book is highly recommended, because I think if we can find out the sort of the gray area between scientific truth, evidence, and what tricks our brain can play, our mind can play on you, associated with the cultural baggage, associated with what kind of circle you are hanging in. And especially now, so from 2 points. One is the fake news and not fake news. So how do you really find out the truth? The other thing is also, I think, no matter what kind of ecosystem, environment that, or a work group that you're working in, you are highly, highly influenced by the environment that you're in and the people that you're hanging out with. So I think, so this is again a book which is highly recommended. It can fit into your personal, I suppose, learning. It can fit into policy making. Are we making policy based on evidence which is biased, or are we making policy which is based on factual evidence? And I think this is something where further down the line, then it finally comes to the fact that we do need to get to scientific evidence as the basic truth. And one thing fascinating is, I didn't realize that the guy who wrote this book, he formed a cult following or group called the Skeptic Group. But he also refers to, the way how he justifies is because there is a group, quite surprising, about 150,000 strong in the world, who actually calls themselves the group who believes in the world is flat.
So, that's not very encouraging. Thank you. Now, just to wrap up, I normally cite a Bhutanese proverb, and you might have heard this because you come from a Songkhla speaking community. La kep mizo juyupzo. A very rough translation would be, it's not important to be learned about the task, but to know the task. or my liberal translation would be, academic learning is not as crucial as experience of the task. So with that, I want to thank you for coming as our guest, and also thank the audience for attending the session. Have a good evening.